Giving feedback is one of the most difficult parts of being a manager. All too often, it's because people are promoted into a position of management because they're good at their jobs. But that also means they're very often not trained in how to give good feedback. And if you don't get it right, you can dent people's confidence, you can break relationships, and you could even lose people. But if you get it right, you unlock potential, you unlock a great culture, you see people excel. My guest today is Clem Pickering. He's an executive coach. He's ICF accredited, and he has decades of experience in helping people get things like feedback right. Together, we're going to break down why feedback often goes wrong, what really good feedback looks like, and then his process for how to give very good feedback to your teams. And of course, like every guest, he's left behind a template that you can download and use immediately to help you improve on giving feedback. We're also going to talk about what it feels like to receive feedback. Very often we don't like hearing the truth and we feel offended or shocked and we go into denial. But then we're blocking off good feedback that can actually help us grow. So if you've ever felt unsure or afraid or uncomfortable about giving or receiving feedback, stay with us. By the end of this conversation, you'll have practical, proven techniques for both giving and receiving feedback. Let's get into it. Clem, thank you for joining us today. You began your life as an engineer, and that's a career that's notoriously difficult because people like to sit at their laptops and talk to machines rather than talking to people. And yet here you are, you've transitioned into management and now coaching, and you're going to talk to us today about giving feedback. How did you make that switch?
Yeah. Well, I guess while I originally started my career to write software, because that's what I kind of love doing, I pretty quickly realized for me, that was a bit doing the same thing all the time. And people brought amazing variety. So working with people, working out ways to get the best out of them, to support them and help them was really quite quickly what I realized I loved to do.
Right. And so now you have a ton of experience. And in your view, why is it really important that somebody who's managing people, grabs hold of giving good feedback and does it really well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing. When people are in a position of management or leadership, the impact they can have on others is often not something they realize. It's there's that expression, isn't there? People don't leave bad companies; they leave bad managers. And so, getting good at interacting with people, being able to support them, give them feedback that helps them grow and develop, for me is absolutely critical. If you do that badly, you kind of risk being one of those people that, people talk about in not very polite terms, shall we say, in their career, or maybe it really impacts them and holds them back.
So what gets in the way? Why aren't more managers good at giving feedback?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess for a start, it's often something that people are just not trained in. When people first become managers, usually they've been promoted because they're good at their existing job, and then they find themselves in a position of kind of having responsibility for others or leading a team without any kind of skills to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's fairly common that if you're good at your job, whatever that is, it could be
Yep.
being an accountant or an engineer or a product manager or something, because you're good, they go, well, now you're going to be a manager. And then suddenly you're in this position where the game has completely changed
hmm
and what's required of you is very different, right?
Yeah. I mean, often it's a totally different set of skills, really. And as you move into those kind of roles, it's not about the individual contribution that you bring. You're suddenly responsible for a wider group of people and helping get the best out of them. And ultimately, perhaps it's less about what you contribute kind of through maybe what you were doing before, but more about how you help others achieve that same thing. Yeah.
And before we move on too far, I'd love to just talk about performance reviews because
Yeah.
I mean, I've got very strong views about those. We're going to do an
Yeah.
episode at some point just about that. But very often a manager will store it up and then they get in that room and they give the person the score and go, now let me give you some feedback. And
Yeah.
of course, it's completely the wrong time and place to be giving feedback.
Totally, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not somebody that kind of gets angry and sweary at any point, but this is a topic that's probably going to be the closest to kind of getting me to that sort of thing. Um, yeah, for me, the performance reviews kind of delivered in the kind of way you just said there are almost the worst kind of anti-pattern of kind of feedback, and maybe why people often sort of shy away from the topic. So yeah, I mean, the idea of storing up feedback to be delivered then in a very artificial, very hierarchical, very kind of command and control type mechanism, really kind of undermines all the benefits of it in my head. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've certainly I've kind of put out posts before. I've got a viewpoint that says there is no place for feedback in performance reviews, certainly if they're annual, because we're just fighting then against all these other things that are going to make it so much less effective for the person to receive. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally share that sense that they are the wrong place to be doing it.
Yeah. Because if nothing else, if you're my manager and you sit me down in that review and you give me all this feedback, I may take it very well,
Hmm.
but I've got no chance to do anything about it to impact my results in that performance review.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if it's annual, then I mean, full stop. That is far too infrequent. The idea for me, a good manager establishes a kind of two-way dialogue with anybody they're working with, and that should be an ongoing process that happens all the time. Whether that's one-to-ones, whether that's working alongside them, there's different ways of kind of building that relationship and supporting and encouraging that person to progress in whatever way they need to. So if feedback is stored up, as you kind of called it, for some sort of infrequent event, then the first thing I'd be encouraging that manager to do is, well, what's making you wait? Why not? What ways have you got of actually helping that person more in the moment, helping them progress? So then, hopefully, by the time it gets to any kind of performance review situation, it's not really anything that needs to be covered. It's been addressed. It's been covered as we've been going along. Um, at best, it's or at worst, it's a summary. Sorry, of just kind of anything of stuff that that person already knows.
And now I'd like to understand from you, what does it feel like when a manager gets good at feedback? And I'd like to start thinking about the relationship between you, my manager, and me, your direct report. Now, you
Hmm.
give good, well-structured feedback at the right time, and you get it right.
Yeah,
What does that feel like for me?
yeah. So, I mean, I guess the best kind of scenario there, that what you're trying to do is to get to this point where um, that person is actually really valuing it. They're kind of thinking, you know what? I look forward to those bits of information, those kind of things that almost create some of those kind of aha moments. So for me, all feedback is subjective. So it is just one person's view of the world, but often that view of the world can be really beneficial. We all kind of get trapped in our own thinking, our own sort of thought patterns. So to have somebody kind of provide a different alternative viewpoint or to prompt some new thinking in a different way, whether that's building on strengths or whether that's kind of adjusting, as you call it, some things that perhaps you hadn't realized the impact they were having. That those kind of aha moments, those kind of positive things. That's that's the best scenario where we get into this kind of relationship of trust and kind of support, where the two people you kind of feel like you're working together. You're both
Yeah.
helping move things forward.
And before we get into, your thoughts on how to give good feedback, I'd love to understand when you are giving me feedback,
Yep.
you're my manager and you're giving me some feedback. What are you giving me feedback on? Is it me Is it my character? Is it my work? Is it my behaviors? Where does good feedback land and where shouldn't it land?
Yeah. So yeah, really important point that you're kind of raising there. Feedback that's based on the person, based on the character, that's where there is a lot of danger. Um, so we need to keep our feedback focused on the kind of behaviors, the actions, the specifics that we can kind of observe. I'm currently reading the book Nonviolent Communication, and again, Marshall Rosenberg, and that talks about this idea of separating observation from kind of our evaluation. So yeah, if I say to you, oh Jeremy, you failed to get that report to me last week, that's just so lazy, then
Mm.
that's going to feel like a personal attack. Um, Sharing with you perhaps that, look, we had an agreement that that report would be with me by Thursday, and it wasn't. You know, that's had an impact because I've had to have a difficult conversation with the client. Um, I was hoping we could have a conversation about that. That's focused on the behaviors, on the kind of the observable actions, rather than me kind of straying into that sort of character assassination territory.
Yeah. And talking about impact is, I think, really important because as
Yeah.
you described there, if someone lets you down, doesn't get something done in time,
Yep.
you have to go and pick up the pieces, right? And you're the one
Yeah.
who kind of gets it on the chin.
Yeah. And I guess for me, there's also some, there's value for that person knowing that as well. So, maybe in a kind of an environment that's scared of feedback, that shies away from it, for want of not offending people, perhaps to not mention that is not particularly kind or supportive to the individual as well. So, actually, maybe it's useful for that person to realize,
Mm.
what I did there had an impact that I wasn't intending, and that impact's kind of rippled on. That's actually going to help them. That's going to be beneficial information for them to kind of adapt what they do going forward, perhaps. So to not tell them is equally as bad, perhaps, as delivering it really unkindly.
Yeah, because otherwise I'm left thinking you are literally just criticizing me and I
Yeah,
don't get the connection between what I failed to do or what I did poorly and, what the outcome was. And, we all want good
yeah,
outcomes. So if there's a bad
yeah,
outcome associated, I should understand that. Because
yeah,
only then can I change my behavior. Only then can I go, actually, Clem needs that report every Thursday. Now I must prioritize and get that done.
yeah,
So, yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And again, another phrase I like to use, it's feedback is just data. It's information, but without that data, I can't really use that for, to help me adjust what I'm doing and that kind of thing. So if I have some data that's delivered to me in a useful way, yeah, sure, I could choose to ignore it if I wish. And ultimately, that's kind of my choice. But ultimately, I might choose to use it in a way that's going to support me and the organization and my manager and all that kind of thing.
Can we talk now about timing?
Yep.
I think a good manager has a regular one-on-one, for
Hmm.
example. Maybe it's every week. I think it should be every week.
Yes.
Some maybe it's not. Should I make feedback part of that and that's it? Or is there another way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess one thing with regard to timing, I often sort of start from how can we make it as timely and as frequent as possible? So, as close to the kind of observation, the event, the behavior, whatever it is, as we possibly can. So, not allowing time to pass. So, I guess if you as a manager are working closely alongside somebody and you observe something, either positive or kind of adjusting that you want to mention, then do it then. Do it immediately. Pass it on in an effective way because that's when it's likely to be most helpful. Now, there are a couple of kind of caveats I feel I should say there that relate to that kind of safety. So, probably not appropriate to do it in a group situation if it's going to
Mhm.
kind of make that person feel shame or humiliated in any way. Or if you're just not sure and it's in a group situation, then probably best to hold it. Equally, what's the environment like? Is it in an open plan office? Is there a chance of it, being overheard? And again, that might make it inappropriate. So yeah, when's the kind of first responsible moment you could give that feedback to them? And that's going to give it the most chance of being effective, I think.
So if you and me are in a meeting together with a bunch of people, maybe a client or somebody
Yep.
important, and I mess up, I say something I shouldn't have done,
Hmm.
you don't give me feedback there and then, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I probably want to say that there's some extreme, hopefully extreme edge cases. If you've said something offensive, I might choose to kind of make a point of saying, oh, Jeremy, I'm not sure that's the best way of putting that. I'm worried you might have offended people.
Yep.
Um, if we're not in that category, let's say you've used a phrase, or maybe you've jumped in and interrupted somebody, or whatever it is that I'm thinking, I might not have done it that way. Yeah, I'm going to hold that until afterwards, so we're not kind of doing that in the open, so to speak.
Thanks, Clem. So now let's get into the approved Clem Pickering approach for giving feedback. Now, like all guests, you've left behind for our audience something they can download later
Yep.
and put into effect straight away. Tell us a bit more about that. What have you left?
Yeah. So it's essentially a manager's guide to effective feedback. And the aim of it is really, it's that kind of starter kit. It's the thing that you wish you had when you first became a manager to kind of get you started with all these good practices for feedback. So yeah, my aim really is that sort of, it's the support guide, it's the run book to help you get going and set off in using and receiving feedback in a kind of really effective way.
Okay, so it's not a bad thing then to think of a situation where maybe I'm a manager. I appreciate I'm not very good at feedback, and I know I need to improve, and I want to improve. So I'm almost going from sort of 0 or 1 to 2 or 3, rather than I'm really, really good at feedback, and this is going to get me from 9 to 10, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I guess as you practice it, as you get more experience, all there's loads to get into. There's loads of nuance, but yeah, no. The aim with my guide is basically, it's that maybe it's a first time manager, maybe it's a new level, maybe that person's just thinking, you know what, shit, I really need to tackle this thing here. I need to get feedback flowing within the team. I don't really know how to do that. Or maybe there's a couple of people I really feel I need to have some open and honest conversations with. And again, I'm a bit daunted by that. I'm a bit
Yeah.
fearful. Maybe I'm putting it off, if I'm honest. It's the thing to help you kind of get past that, start that process going.
Good. All right. Where do we start? What's the first thing I should do?
Yeah. So some of it we've talked about today already. So I guess it's those prerequisites, it's sort of setting the scene. So starting from, why is it I want to get feedback flowing? Is it to help people grow and learn? In which case, we're kind of all good. If it's something a bit more formal or performance related, again, my suggestion there is people sort of adjust where they might be coming from. So how do we need to start with those prerequisites in place? Are we doing it for the right reasons? Have we thought about things like psychological safety? Have we got the preconditions for it to be effective? So we need to start there before we start moving on to kind of techniques. Did that
Can
kind
I
of
ask more
answer that
about that? So,
question?
is it a good thing for me to almost publicly declare to my team, I'm about to start giving feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way that lands when you say that is that might, if it's unexpected, if that's not the culture right now, that might come across as a little bit like, oh my god, don't know where this is
Uh-huh.
going. Um, but the transparency, yeah, absolutely. So having some sort of team situation where we're sort of saying, look, our aim is to kind of grow and improve. I want to sort of start to build a culture where we can share what's going well, what's not going so well, learn, adapt, improve. Um, that's my aim here. One approach I might start to try and encourage is, how do we get feedback flowing between all of us? That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. And then maybe even open it up, find out what other ideas others have got. Again, it's about sort of normalizing it and getting it away from that top down hierarchical um, sort of judgment that they might
Yeah.
come from. So that's where we need to start setting the scene so that when feedback does start flowing, um, we stand the most chance of it being effective.
Okay, so now we're beginning to build a culture where people accept that feedback is happening and people are getting more comfortable with receiving and maybe giving feedback.
Yep.
As a manager, what's my next step? What's my practice? How should I practice this?
Yeah. 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 So I'm gonna bring you back to ask actually there. So you mentioned giving and receiving, but let me come back to ask. So first step, start asking for feedback. Model the kind of behavior that you're wanting in a way. So asking for feedback, showing that you're finding it valuable, showing that you're using it for learning. That's probably where I'd go to. So seize the opportunities to, you know, tee up moments of feedback, perhaps before a team meeting, perhaps before working alongside someone, perhaps before giving a leadership presentation. Tee up people to give you that feedback and help them do it effectively by making it specific, making it kind of detailed on one particular thing. So how am I coming across when I'm presenting this thing, for example? I'd love some feedback on that. If we start by asking and we start by modeling what we want, then again, we're sort of avoiding perhaps that judgment sort of sense. So that's where I'd start.
Okay, and now I'm feeling more comfortable with giving feedback. Let's talk about how that's structured. So you're going to give me some feedback. I'm not asking you to actually give me feedback now, but
Yeah, 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 yeah.
in a situation where you are about to give me feedback, what words do you use? What structure do you
Yes.
use?
Yeah. So I have a kind of template for kind of to help people get better maybe at giving feedback, if we're kind of coming on to that now. I would say there's a whole bunch of templates available actually. You mentioned the kind of feedback sandwich earlier. Don't use that one. But there are lots out there. So this is the one though I think I've kind of settled on over the years. And I kind of call it.
So would you explain for people who don't know what the sandwich is?
Yeah.
Just talk for a second about that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the feedback sandwich, also known as the shit sandwich, if we're being unpolite about it, um, is maybe one of the most well-known kind of feedback techniques. And the idea with that is you've got some meat in the middle of the sandwich, the thing that you really want to say, and normally that's somehow constructive or might be perceived as negative. So in order to sort of soften the blow of of how that lands with them, you're going to wrap it in a compliment and then another compliment at the end, hence the kind of sandwich. So you open with something that's positive, Jeremy, you're doing a great job, really pleased with what you're doing at the moment. However, and then you
Mhm.
hit them with the kind of the thing you actually wanted to say.
So now I'm crying.
Yeah. But then so that you don't hurt their feelings too much, you leave it on a positive note. So, overall though, great job. Brilliant. Love your work. The problem with that, I guess, is particularly if people are aware of it, it's pretty patronizing. The person's probably saying, well, look, just cut to the chase. Let's have a good open conversation about the thing I could potentially improve. If the person isn't familiar with that technique, or, it can just be quite confusing. Are they saying something positive about me? Maybe I'll
Yeah.
just remember that bit. I've actually missed the bit in the middle completely. Basically, I'm just confused. So there kind of are better ways of doing it, I think, in my head, and that's why I kind of steer people away from that
Mm.
kind of technique.
I did hear one interesting take on the shit sandwich just recently, which
Yep.
I looked at and went, no, that's actually quite a good idea. So you're right. If you sort of say, you're doing really, really good at this thing over here, but this thing over here, by the way, you're terrible at, and that was really awful. And then switch context again but however, you're doing really well on this. You're
Yep.
right. It feels disjointed, and I just don't know what to take away from that. But the idea I heard was that you can use it, but you can say, I'm really enjoying the way that you contribute to meetings lately, for example. However, what I notice is that you overtalk people in those meetings. And so if you were to rein that back, the meeting will be more productive. But
Uh-huh.
keep going really well on your planning for the meetings, for example. So that the context is very, very close.
Yep.
And I can see that I'm really good at meetings, but I have something I can improve in the meetings.
Yeah. 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 I guess what I would say to that is, so um, we talked a bit already about the benefits of the kind of positive feedback. So not just affirmation, well done, but actually highlighting the things that is a strength for somebody. So yeah, absolutely. I'm an advocate of doing that. And then where there are some constructive things as well, then yeah, definitely raise those. That's going to help that person. Just don't think of it as a kind of formula of positive, negative, positive. And actually, if feedback's flowing regularly, there will be plenty of opportunities to share both the positives and also the things to kind of adjust as well as we go forward. So maybe it's the fact that people kind of latch onto it as a sandwich is the thing I think that makes it a little bit ineffective.
Thanks for clearing that up. So we know that the shit sandwich is generally not the thing that you should do.
Yeah.
So let's get back onto where we were, which is you as my manager are about to give me some feedback.
Yep.
What's going through your brain? What's the structure to make sure that you deliver feedback in a way that lands really well with me?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a template that I like to kind of refer to as kind of see, think, feel. And I'll explain a little bit about how that works. I guess though, one thing to say is it's not necessarily a template for delivery verbatim. So it's not necessarily a script that you would read out, but it's a really helpful structure for thinking about it ahead of time so that you can kind of separate the key parts that you're going to say and make sure you can weave those into a more natural conversation. So I always just like to say that it's not necessarily about writing a script, bringing a book and reading it out. But it is about thinking about, okay, how do I make this land really well? How can I make sure it's helpful? It's detailed, it's useful to that person. And this template for me kind of helps you kind of do that.
Let's go
Um,
through it.
cool.
See, think, feel.
Yeah. So let me acknowledge the Better Conversations Foundation, which I think is where I kind of first saw this first kind of this way of kind of thinking about it like that. The name I kind of use as a moniker for it is my own, but the kind of template is something that I first heard on a course by the Better Conversations Foundation. So really what we're doing is we're starting with what you kind of observed. So what was it you saw or heard that you want to share with them? And that's indeed the place to start. So share what I saw or what I heard was, and then be really specific, be detailed. So not just you not being very effective in that meeting. That's not detailed enough. Hone in on what are the actual things you saw or heard were. So we're focused on the facts. We're not focused on the person's character. So that's the
Okay, so
first part.
I guess that would help me as a receiver, because if you sort of say to me broadly, you need to be more effective in meetings, I've got no idea how to do that. But
Totally.
if you
Yeah.
say you interrupt too much, I know I can stop interrupting and then I'm more effective in the meeting.
Yeah. And maybe on that one and the interrupter, actually, what I saw was when you were talking to Tom, he was mid-flow, and I saw you cut him off, and he lost his train of thought. So the more detailed, the more specific, the more kind of real we can make it in the person receiving its head, the better.
Got it. Okay, so that's the C
Yeah.
part.
So that's the first bit. So then the second bit is the think. So what did you kind of infer from that? So what are what's the thinking that triggered, but also what are the assumptions that you might be making? And this is your opportunity, I guess, to share what's going on in your head as the feedback giver, but doing it in a way that is open to some interpretation and also humble enough and kind of open enough to say, this is just my view. So what I inferred from that was, when you cut Tom off, you were really keen to speak, and that passion was kind of getting the benefit of, getting on top of you. So I'm assuming you were really keen to kind of get your point across. That's what I was kind of thinking when I saw you do that.
Okay. Let me ask a slightly provocative question.
Yeah, feel free.
At this point, you've told me what you saw.
Yep.
You saw me interrupting Tom,
Yeah.
and you've told me what your inference was from that, what you're thinking. Now, if I'm not trained in receiving feedback, I may be sitting here thinking, yeah, but you have no idea. He'd been speaking for 10 minutes and somebody needed to stop him. And secondly, I might think, well, you're welcome to your opinion, mate, but
Mm-hmm.
actually you're wrong, or I don't
Yeah.
agree
Yeah.
with you. So now I'm beginning
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
close
Yeah.
down.
So, couple of responses to that. Firstly, yes, good. So I'm sharing my assumptions. I'm sharing maybe the things that I'd interpreted from that situation, but I'm being open to the fact that that other person might have a different view on things. Tom had been
Mhm.
talking for 10 minutes. Somebody needed to jump in and cut him off. So, yeah, maybe that changes my view of the situation. And then we're into this two-way dialogue. So that for me is a good thing. Um, to your second point, though, that I guess should I take it on board or not? Um, we're going to come on to, I guess, why I think that's important with the next part, which is for me to kind of share the impact on me. So, having shared what I saw or heard, having shared what I'd kind of taken from that, what I'm thinking, the next bit is to share kind of what I felt. So the impact on me was I felt really awkward. I felt really angry, actually, if I'm being totally honest, because
Right.
Tom was really in a flow on that, and so that kind of anger and that kind of awkwardness really did come up for me, um, and that's maybe even made me think, slightly less favourably to having you in meetings, if I'm being totally open. So I'm kind of riffing on this situation here, obviously, but I'm sharing now what is real for me, what I'm feeling based on my assumptions. Now that still gives you the chance to come back and say, well, hang on a minute, I was doing it to cut Tom off because he was talking for so long. And maybe that will allow me to then I'll maybe adapt how I'm thinking. But you now know, if I could get my words out, the impact that it's had on me, and that's what's particularly powerful.
And I can't disagree with that, can I? I
No,
cannot disagree with whether you were feeling angry or frustrated or not. That's a
exactly.
fact.
And that's a really, really important point. So I'm not judging you. I'm not saying you shouldn't have done that, Jeremy. That was not on, and all these kind of judgmenty or sort of evaluation type things. I'm just sharing what's real for me. So how I felt was pretty angry and pretty awkward in that situation.
Right.
And you're right. You can't really come back on that. That's my reality, and so I can own that. But I can also do that in a kind of honest and kind of transparent way.
And then you and me can have a conversation and maybe I can express how I saw things a bit differently,
Exactly.
but at least we can come up with that common ground and say, am I right in future or how do I interrupt in future?
Yes.
How do I stop Tom in his flow? I get
Exactly.
it. So I like that. That's a really, really good template to have in my mind for how to deliver feedback to somebody. So it's what I saw, what I observed, it's what I thought about that situation, and then how I'm feeling.
Yes.
What next?
Yeah. So the final part is to again essentially show support and make it helpful to that person. So it's sharing your intent. So my intent in having this conversation or my intent in giving this feedback to you is, and then that gives you the opportunity to sort of show the other person why you're sharing. So that both increases the importance, perhaps, why was it important enough for you to want to share, but it's also an opportunity then to be helpful and supportive. So my intention is in giving you this feedback is so that you can be more aware in meetings as to when the best time to contribute is, and I'd like to help you with that.
I
So
understand that now.
yeah,
Yeah. So what I saw, what I thought, um, what I felt,
yeah,
and then what was my intent.
yeah.
And
Why am
then
I
that
sharing?
allows, yeah, so then that opens up the floor for you and me to have a dialogue and talk about, I can challenge you maybe, or I can
Yeah,
agree or whatever, but at least we have some common ground to talk about it. And hopefully I can come out with some tactic. What do we do when Tom is over talking? What do I do when I feel the urge to interrupt or whatever?
yeah,
So
yeah.
let's talk more about the receiver. So if
Hmm.
we go through that same situation, you've just given me this feedback. Do I just sit back and just go, oh, come, here comes some feedback? How can I train myself to, maybe if I'm an interrupter, the minute you say, I saw you interrupting Tom, maybe I'm going to interrupt you and say, yeah, but
Yeah.
so how do I train myself to receive feedback correctly?
Yes. Yeah. And again, really, really good question, because I think often we go to that how to give feedback and we don't think enough about how to receive it well. So, yeah, I have a little technique that I like to kind of offer for this as well. Um, Before I delve into that, let me just kind of also, you just prompted another memory of actually somebody years ago told me there's only a couple of appropriate ways to respond to feedback. And one is to say thank you.
Hmm.
And the other is just to say go on, or to,
Okay.
ask for a bit more. So, yeah, step one, resist the urge to jump in and defend. If you do so, you're going to miss that information, that data. So, yeah, pausing and stopping is probably the thing to do in the moment. Bite your tongue, try and remain open to hearing it. So thank you for kind of seeding that in as well. To get onto then the technique, this is essentially a kind of coaching technique that can be used for sort of self-reflection as well, um, that I refer to as ABC, because yeah, like any acronym, those things hopefully help you remember it and bring it to mind. So it's essentially a way of reflecting when you've received some feedback, and maybe that's a little bit after the event, maybe it's shortly after it, whatever is appropriate. So the A stands for, well, what was the activating event or situation? So again, we're kind of back here to the observations, the facts. It's back to that. What did you see or what did you hear from your point of view? So if we're using that same example earlier, so Clem gave me that feedback, but yeah, it was triggered by that meeting where I interrupted Tom. And what I remember was thinking, God, Tom's going on for absolutely ages. So yeah, I was seeing and hearing Tom go on, and that's where I'm kind of starting from. Focuses you in on again that the data, the kind of observation, the facts of the situation. So that's the A. Um, the B is then for beliefs. So what are your beliefs about that? What are you thinking um, around that? But then also to question those beliefs. What are they actually helpful? Are they useful? So, you might believe, again, to go with our example, I was doing the right thing. I was thinking I had to get another voice in the room. Um, and actually, in being quite forthright and assertive, maybe, I believe that was the right thing to do. But then to kind of question that, well, how else could I have approached it? What are the beliefs? Is that belief always going to be useful to me? Maybe it is in some situations, but actually there could be other beliefs I could bring. So what if I believed that giving airtime to others was going to allow them to get to the end of their thinking? Maybe there's another way I could have steered the meeting to that kind of particular point, giving Tom a bit more space and time. Whatever it is, it's trying to bring that self-reflection to, is this belief supporting me and helping me? But if not, what else could I replace it with? What other angles could there be?
What does the C stand for? I get A with the actions and B my
Yep.
beliefs.
So
What's
that's
the
gonna
C stand for?
so that's gonna bring us on to consequences.
Got it.
So similar, you'll probably spot the similar thing. It's almost like the template from before, but from the other side and more for self-reflection. So, okay, what are the consequences of believing those things? What's the impact if I continue to do so? What's the impact that I am feeling as a result of that? So, maybe I'm feeling that that's my duty to do that. Maybe I'm feeling that actually that's me contributing in the most effective way. Um, there could be some positive supporting things, but equally there could be some things where I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm believing that I'm terrible at communicating with people because of that. So that belief is leading me to kind of be a bit hard and a bit self-critical on myself. Well, actually, again, can we reframe that? Maybe it's, well, actually, I just need to open up my toolkit of approaches I could bring in that situation. Maybe I need to spend a little bit more time observing how other people are doing it. How do I change that consequence that's going to lead me down a more constructive and positive route?
Got it. Okay, that's useful. That sounds quite reflective after the event. May
Mhm.
I just drill in a bit more to the moment where,
Yeah, please
you
do.
sit me down and you give me that feedback and, like being a human,
Yep,
I may run through those emotions of, um, resentment or resistance
yep.
or disbelief or scared or something. I may be having a whole bunch of feelings going through me. What do I do in the moment?
Yes. So I guess that's maybe where I would come back to. Well, actually, let me come back to again. This is partly our whole topic of conversation today. Actually, if we can make these feedback kind of occurrences more normal and less kind of a sudden like surprise attack kind of feel, then actually it becomes easier because we're used to this way of communicating. But let's say it has caught you off guard and you're a bit defensive straight away. I would come back to those things again of remembering actually feedback is just data. I need to I need to hear this. I need to open my filters so I can receive it. So in order to do that, maybe there's another little acronym which is wait. Why am I talking?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. So maybe even put the tongue in the roof of your mouth, count to three, those kind of techniques, pause. Let's just let that person say what they want to say and don't jump in with some defensive reply. Again, practicing that, helping you do that in situations that are less emotive can then make it easier to do when the stakes are a bit higher, I would say. But ultimately, it's about not defending straight away, of being open to receiving that information, knowing that you don't have to agree with it, and knowing that hopefully we're going to have a good two-way conversation about it.
Yeah, and the word that came into my head as you were speaking was credibility. So if I'm sitting here listening to you giving me feedback, and if for some reason I don't think you're credible,
Hmm.
it's going to be more difficult for me to take feedback from
Yeah,
you, right? What do you know?
yeah,
Whereas
totally.
when you have that culture, and if you stick to that see, think, feel, and then intention, it's actually really hard for me not to give that credibility.
Yeah,
It's not you anymore. It's not Clem giving it to me. It's actually something being held up to me for me to look at and say,
completely.
yeah, actually, that's me.
Yeah, really good point. And again, what that brings us back to in my head is that if it's a manager kind of swooping in like a seagull and giving some feedback once every 3 months, then yeah, there's no
Yeah,
credibility there. What does
yeah.
this person actually know? Clem's just come into my meeting. He knows no history with Tom. He doesn't know what the situation is. I'm not going to pay any attention. So is the feedback coming from sources that are credible is a great way of thinking about it. How do we set up the information to be flowing regularly, not to be this surprise event?
Can I ask you about one more area? And that is, imagine you are the manager of a team and everyone that reports into you is just awesome. They're knocking it out of the park. Their behaviors are great. Their outcomes are terrific. Everything about them is just great. And you're really stuck with how do I give them feedback? And by the way, I notice a strong correlation between those sort of people and people who say, give me feedback. They're very often knocking on your door saying, give me feedback, give me feedback.
Yeah.
And yet they're the most difficult people to give feedback to.
Yes. So yeah, if I'm understanding that sort of scenario, how that's kind of forming in my head is, you've got a team that's absolutely nailing it. They are high performing. It's working really well. But yet they're still craving more feedback, more
Yeah.
ways to improve. So, I mean, first thing I would say is what a fantastic situation. So I'd be tempted just to kind of go with, well, roll with it to start with and just see how it goes. Because again, things are temporal as well. So no high performing team stays equally high performing forever. So there's always going to be areas to focus on. So to come to your point though about if they're asking you for feedback and you're thinking, I really don't know what I can kind of teach them or what I can pass on to them in that sort of sense. Um, there's a couple of thoughts there. One might be that you're not the right person to give that feedback. So actually, again, it's back to encouraging them to think about, you know what, actually, maybe I'm not the right person to give you feedback. Who else could you ask? What else would be useful for you? Maybe actually, if we can bring Helen in from that other team, she's doing some great stuff in that area that you seem keen to develop on. So broker those relationships. Um, and then I guess the other angle would be to to help people think about what success actually looks like. So, are you observing that they're focusing in on one particular area? And actually, how could you help them kind of expand that kind of picture? So, maybe there are areas that you think this high performing team could be even better in. And how do you kind of help encourage people to reflect on that?
Yeah, and on other shows we've talked a bit about promotion and getting to the next level, and very often, yeah, there is, and I firmly agree with this. You need to be performing at the next level before you can be considered to be promoted into it. And
Hmm.
sometimes there's a gap between how someone is operating now awesomely,
Yep.
but where the and the next level, and that's the feedback to be giving, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one final area I'd love to explore is what happens if, again, you're my manager
Yep.
and Sally taps on your shoulder and gives you some feedback about me, and maybe it's not good feedback, maybe it's something which they've seen that they just don't like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you now almost have a duty to pass that on to me. How do you do that?
Yeah, so difficult situation, but one that I've been in many times. So I guess the first thing I always like to try and do is work out how to not be that feedback middleman. So if Sally's spoken to me, what is it that makes her uncomfortable with speaking to you directly? Is there any way that I can actually broker that conversation, or kind of help that feel safe? Or maybe it's a three-way conversation. What are the options that mean I don't have to be that kind of that communication hop where, again, we could kind of data can be lost, interpretations can be made, all that kind of stuff. If that isn't possible, and there are some situations where it won't be possible to do that, then I guess it's about, again, bringing the same sort of things we've talked about to that. So being open, trying to focus in, open to both sides of the story, trying to focus in on facts and observations, maybe kind of validating anything like that. So, Sally shared that Jeremy tends to interrupt a lot. Sorry, we're picking on this over and
Yeah,
over.
I'm obviously
Um,
an interrupter. I get
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Sorry.
How do I verify that for myself? Have I got any observations I can bring to that to myself? And maybe I'll do a little bit of research before we have that conversation. Um, Hopefully that kind of answers that a little bit. But yeah, I
Yeah.
totally recognise that situation, and
Clem, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. We've been speaking for this topic is so rich. I'm sure we could speak for days about
yes,
feedback,
indeed,
and I know it's something that a lot of managers struggle with.
yeah, yeah,
That they've maybe never been trained, or they're just not comfortable with it. So your material is amazing, and naturally you've left behind the guide for managers to download, and I
yeah,
encourage the audience to go do that. But before we wrap up completely, I always like to ask people, if someone's listening to this, there's clearly a fair bit of work in going through the template and getting it right.
hmm,
But there must be one small change that I can make immediately, this afternoon, this morning, whatever it is. I'm a manager. I want
yeah,
to improve my feedback. What's one small change I can do straight away?
yes. So, I mean, let me come back to go and ask for it. So, model what you want. So start with yourself, start asking others for feedback in kind of some of the ways we've been talking about. Because if you do nothing else, that will start encouraging others to do likewise.
Perfect. Thank you, Clem. Now, you spend your time now coaching managers and leaders to help them improve. If someone's listening to this or watching this and thinking, I'd like to explore that a bit more with Clem, how should they reach out to you?
Yeah. So website is probably what I would say. So clementpickering.com. There's contact details on there. You can book a free chat just to have I just love to have chats with people, basically. LinkedIn as well. You'll find me on LinkedIn. So please feel free to send me a connection request, and yeah, very happy to have conversations.
Amazing. Thank you so much indeed, Clem. I just want to wrap up by saying, as I've already said, this is a very, very complex, problem strewn area. It's something that a lot of managers struggle with. Some are great, of course, but I think
Yep.
a lot of people struggle, and particularly people who have been elevated into management just because they're good at their job. So this is a very unnatural area for them. So your tips and your structure really helps somebody move from I'm scared of giving feedback, or I've tried it and it was uncomfortable, or it didn't land well, into I now have a method. I now understand what I should be doing. I now have a basic track. I now think I'm going to go and give this a go and getting it work. And I'm really happy that we talked about the positive impact on a team, an environment, on a company when that culture of feedback is in place. So thank you tremendously for everything you've done for us today. Thank you, Clem.
No worries. Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're most welcome. And if you're listening into this, please go to the buildyouredge.org website. There you'll find details about the show and you'll find details about Clem. And you can also download the template to use immediately. Go off and do it. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.